let's talk cornerback and safety room here, Tim, as we round out the depth chart conversation we've been having here late. So, cornerback, man, where to begin? It's been an interesting few months here as the season wind down and everybody expecting Jair Alexander to be gone. He's still on the roster, obviously. There's still, I think the large majority of people still don't expect him to play for the Packers. However, as it sits right now, he is on the roster. So let's talk about what the cornerback room would look like with and without him. Okay, let's start with him here. So you would have, according to our lads, and again, it doesn't mean we agree with this, they're saying Jair Alexander at left cornerback, Keyshawn Nixon at right cornerback, Nate Hobbs, the newly added free agent out of Las Vegas, will be starting in the slot. Okay, so there's your starters. And they're saying backing those guys up is Carrington Valentine on the left, Micah Robinson on the right, and then Kalen King in the nickelback position. It's really interesting there.
That's interesting, yeah.
And again, we're not saying we agree with it, but I think as you get a little deeper on the depth chart, you can see how they come up with that. Because next you've got at left cornerback Isaiah Dunn, who, if I remember correctly, was a free agent signing. Technically, they signed him there to a futures, I believe it was. And then Caleb Hayes at the right cornerback position and Kamal Haddon in at nickelback. And then behind them, you've got Kazir Brown, Tyron Herring, and Jonathan Baldwin backing those guys up. So, for me personally, you want to throw Javon Bullard in the mix as well. I don't like the idea of him just sitting on the bench and you potentially working in Micah Robinson over him. Although I'm excited about Micah Robinson, and hopefully we can get a chalk talk put together on him before we get into training camp and all that. But I would definitely consider Javon Bullard ahead of that second wave of guys other than Carrington Valentine. And Carrington Valentine is the one that sticks out the most to me, Tim. If Jair Alexander's gone,
that's your CB1 over there.
I want him plugged right in where Jair would have been. And I know there's people going, what are you talking about, Clayton? Guys, the reality is when you look at the PFF grades last year, Jair Alexander 75.2, Carrington Valentine 65.5, then Keyshawn 64, Nate Hobbs 61.4, Javon Bullard 54.2. Carrington Valentine, hands down, has the highest PFF grade. And he had a coverage grade of 71.4, which was 11 points higher than the other guys who are not named Jair Alexander, right? So, okay, well, PFF isn't everything. I'm with you. What about passer rating when targeted? Okay, when you go to passer rating when targeted, cornerbacks, Jair Alexander, 79.9. Second on the team, Carrington Valentine, 82.8. And then you got to go all the way down to Eric Stokes at 96.7. Then Keyshawn Nixon at 97.5. And then Javon Bullard at 119.8. To keep in mind, he played a lot of safety as well, right? So, for me, Tim, I want Carrington Valentine on the damn field this year, man. I do. Yeah. Now, if Ja's here, it's going to be tough, right? Because what it's going to come down to, if Jair does return to the Packers, it would be a camp battle between Carrington Valentine and Keyshawn Nixon. I just feel like Keyshawn Nixon's kind of one of the coaching favorites on this team. So I think they would still start him over Carrington. But I really do believe Carrington Valentine's underrated. But anyway, whichever direction you want to take it, what do you think about this cornerback room, man?
Yeah, a lot to digest here, right? I think I'm with you 100% with the feelings on Carrington Valentine. And Javon Bullard to me is the interesting wild card because, if we look at this depth chart and take it at face value, a name could slide over or up or down on the depth chart at any time. But I think what this shows is, ideally they're looking for Javon Bullard to play safety, and they're
That's exactly right.
They'd be taking the approach of, your slots are going to be Nate Hobbs, Kalen King, and then, in case of emergency break glass, it's Keyshawn Nixon, or maybe, you have to shift Bullard into a slot corner role. But that's if Bullard can hold his own behind Evan Williams as a number 2 safety over there, with the coverage grade and stuff. So if he takes a step this year, that'll be interesting. Omar Brown, number 3 on the depth chart. Another guy that we were kind of keeping one eye open for that draft year in 2024. And we didn't see much of him last year. If he takes a step and shows that, he can hold his own, it gives us flexibility with that nickel position. But when it comes to the boundary corners, I'm with you. If Ja's not on this team, or if Ja's not playing, it should be CV over there, opposite of Keyshawn Nixon. And then hopefully you get a guy like Micah Robinson to pop, and hopefully Nate Hobbs and Kalen King do well in the slot, and we don't have to play chess all the time, moving pieces around. But I think a lot of this is going to hinge on Bullard and his ability to truly play safety in the NFL.
Definitely. And again, we'll kind of dive into the safety room here in a second and look at who we like over who if Evan Williams wasn't starting. But let's see what the chat's saying about the cornerback room here. Jake G126 says, I will say Bullard did pretty well for a rookie getting tossed around at different positions. That's a great point, Jake. And I feel like he hands down played his best football in the slot as opposed to safety. It just seems like he was more comfortable playing that nickel role. And being able to attack against the run, and they'll even fire him on some of those nickel blitzes too when they wanted to bring kind of a little bit of an exotic look there. So,
I've always felt like Bullard is a linebacker trapped in a DB's body, basically.
Yeah, I could see that. He does play a little more like a linebacker than a cornerback. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Chris Casuan says Bull is being underrated at this point. I don't know if I guess it just depends on what you mean by underrated, Chris. I think some fans absolutely, That's why when I hear him talk about, he's a bust, and I'm like, you didn't like him in the nickel? I thought he looked pretty good in the nickel. When you look at the passer rating when targeted, it's a little bit skewed because I don't have the numbers breaking it down from which position he played. I do know that he graded out better when he moved to the nickels. So I think I would agree with what Chris is saying here, that he is being a little bit underrated based off of what he was asked to do. I mean, how many rookies, Tim, do you know in the league that can jump around from nickel and then play both safety positions, whether they did it good or not? The fact that they were able to get out there and get that many meaningful reps. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we think he ain't going to be better this year,
I would agree. And I think that it's fair to make that assessment that, maybe underrated is not the word, maybe overlooked, in some respects, or, whatever, verbiage you'd like to use there. But I agree. I think he's poised for a year 2 jump. And, if he can pop at that safety position, it's going to help him and help us, really.
Right. Daryl in the chat says Jonathan Baldwin was signed on a $115,000 signing bonus and $100K guaranteed. That's great information there, Daryl. And I think that stuff does matter to a certain extent. However, I will say this. I remember us having this conversation about I can't remember the specific player, but that was the big talking point was, he'll definitely make the roster because he got the most guaranteed money. And they end up cutting him. And I remember going, well, I was wrong on that one. So I think it really does come down to fielding the best team. However, that is important. Thank you for that information. Sure. Professor Cake says, I agree, Clayton, on CV. It shows how much he has developed because even you as a Kentucky fan did not mince words when talking about how CV did in his rookie year. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, Professor Cakes. Like he was hot garbage his rookie year. And then last year he takes that big leap, that step forward, played a lot of meaningful reps or snaps, I should say. And that's what I think gives me a little bit more hope about Javon Bullard, just to see the jump that a 7th-round pick in Carrington Valentine took. You'd like to think a 2nd-rounder could definitely take that kind of jump as well. I know we got Emilio joining us here. Emilio, we'll just work you in whenever you feel comfortable to comment. I know you're coming in going, what the heck are we even talking about? But we're just looking at the cornerback room, then we're going to jump into the safety room before we get into the little Colin Oliver talk.
Good deal.
All right, Deadfish says, I'm okay with Carrington Valentine being a backup this year, but he will probably be starting. Maybe he meant next year. Be starting next year. Maybe is what he meant. He said we'll probably be starting this year. But yeah, for me with Carrington, I think he's proven that he can play at this level. That's what it comes down to for me.
So we broke camp with 5 corners last year, right?
Yeah. Let me double check. Let me pull up the article. Talk for a second. I'll grab that.
I think it was 5 corners, 5 safeties, if I'm not mistaken. So that just poses the question based on this, way too early depth chart prediction. If they were to keep 5 corners, who do you think the 5 are?
Yeah, it was 5 corners.
Was it? Okay, so let's assume it's 5 again, just for the sake of argument.
Right. Yeah, you had 5 corners and 5 safeties. The 5 corners were Jai Alexander, Eric Stokes, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Corey Valentine. So you're replacing 2 of those guys, obviously. with two new faces. One being Nate Hobbs. You can go ahead and check that off the box.
Yep.
So that now you're asking yourself, who's the fifth? That's really what it comes down to. If they break camp with the same amount, and who's to say that they will or won't? But if you look at it here, according to the depth chart, you'd think it's Kalen King, right? Looking at this,
I would think so, right? Yeah.
That's exciting, too, because I think Kalen King's got a high ceiling. I really do. What do you think about the cornerback room, Emilio? Anything stick out to you before we move to safety, man?
Man, it's just tough looking at it because at first I was like, all right, left corner, right corner, we're good. And then I have to look down. I've still got to get Hobbs in there. Kalen King, I think it's between him and Micah Robinson, really. So that's tough. The way when Ryan was doing his pod earlier, him going into talking about wanting to be here, just playing the best, his attitude, I really loved it. But man, I really liked Kalen King too, and he was supposed to be the top, like a top 5 corner when he came out. Then had a bad year that second year.
Definitely. Joseph in the chat says, without Jair, I'm worried about that DB room. I want to agree with you on the surface, Joseph, but we played without Jair last year, And again, as we pointed out, and I'm not saying Jair isn't a good football player. Don't get me wrong. I think the team is better with him on it. He missed almost 70% of the snaps last year, right? If I remember correctly, it was over 65% of the snaps. 65, But with that being said, they still finished top 5 in EPA per dropback, So it's like, I honestly think that's one of the things that's fueling Goody to be willing to part ways with Jair. Is he's looking up going, man, if I could save that cap space, and I think our DB room's good enough. If they truly did hit on Nate Hobbs in free agency, that can make all the difference in the world as well. So very interesting, though. Anything else on corner, guys, before we move on? Anything at all?
No, I think it's a great point. Like how we did play well last year. We had 2 safeties on the field, 3 safeties on the field a lot. I mean, you have Evan Williams, you got Javon Bullard, you got X, and we're worried about grabbing that 5th or 6th corner. What if we just need 2 on the outside and they're still running the safeties in the middle? So it's, are we going big nickel, whatever you want to call it? I'm kind of excited to see Halfley, do his thing this year.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Joseph says, if we can't work it out, then we're 1 injury away from Travis Glover being on the boundary. Emilio said, hey, listen, he can play press, man. He ain't worried about it.
He can play press, man. All you need is 3 seconds to get to the quarterback, so.